No pilot takes off in a Category 5 blizzard. Base command declared, all aircraft grounded, no hope left for the missing team. But then, a mysterious dot appeared on radar screens. A battered UH-60 Black Hawk diving down through swirling snow clouds, defying every safety protocol. Inside, 14 survivors, frozen but alive. The cockpit door cracked open, revealing the quiet girl they said only knew how to tighten bolts. Deep in Alaska's frozen wilderness sits Ridgepoint Air Base, carved into the northern mountains where howling blizzards isolate the outpost completely for 3 brutal months every winter. Ice forms on everything. Temperatures drop to -40. Most personnel count days until rotation ends. Our protagonist, Lieutenant Hazel Quinn, 32 years old, barely 5'4" in her steel-toed boots. Black hair always braided tight on both sides, wire-rimmed glasses constantly fogged from cold air, wearing the same faded blue technician coveralls every single day. Her hands are permanently stained with hydraulic fluid and engine grease. But Hazel wasn't always a mechanic hiding in coveralls. She used to be Ridgepoint's most elite medical evacuation pilot, completed over 120 long-distance emergency missions across Alaska's deadliest terrain. She could fly nights without radar guidance, navigate by stars alone, land on mountain peaks in zero visibility. Other pilots called her Ghost because she appeared out of nowhere when people needed saving most. 3 years ago, everything changed. While executing a dangerous rescue mission during a winter storm, Hazel received an emergency call. Her father had collapsed at home, rushed to intensive care. Heart attack, critical condition. She faced an impossible choice: abandon her current mission with lives at stake, or continue flying while her father fought for life 200 miles away. Hazel chose duty, completed the rescue, saved 3 injured climbers. Her father died while she was still airborne. She never forgave herself for not being there during his final moments. The guilt consumed her. 6 months later, Hazel voluntarily requested transfer from flight operations to ground maintenance, moving to Ridgepoint's technical division to care for her seriously ill mother who lived nearby. Everyone knew Hazel's history, but most assumed she'd simply lost her nerve after personal tragedy. A private once muttered loud enough for others to hear, "People like her should stay home. Stop pretending they belong around helicopters anymore." Hazel never responded to comments like that. She just worked with obsessive precision, checking every circuit board twice, adjusting pneumatic systems by hand instead of using automated tools, spending extra hours ensuring every bolt was torqued to exact specifications. During quiet moments, she stood alone on the landing pad, watching helicopter rotor blades spin during pre-flight checks, making detailed notes with a stubby pencil in a weathered notebook. The other mechanics respected her technical expertise, but whispered behind her back, "Shame she lost her courage. Such wasted training. At least she's useful with a wrench now." Hazel heard every whisper. She just kept working, kept observing, kept remembering every unique sound each helicopter made when something wasn't quite right. Tuesday morning, a specialized work team of 14 experienced personnel departed Ridgepoint Base on what should have been a routine mission: repair critical communication equipment at an isolated radio relay station 80 kilometers northeast. The weather forecast predicted light snow, manageable winds, standard winter conditions for the region. They never made it back. By afternoon, a massive blizzard system swept down from the Arctic, bringing Category 5 wind gusts exceeding 90 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to absolute zero. Temperatures plummeted to -50 degrees Fahrenheit with wind chill. Every communication channel went silent. Radar screens showed nothing but white static where the team's vehicles should have appeared. Air traffic control issued emergency orders. All aircraft operations suspended indefinitely. Repeat, no personnel authorized for takeoff under any circumstances. Base Commander Colonel Richards gathered senior staff for emergency briefing. The grim reality was undeniable. 14 people were stranded in the worst blizzard Alaska had seen in 5 years, with no shelter, limited supplies, and zero chance of immediate rescue. Even their emergency beacon had gone silent. Everyone assumed the worst. One officer quietly began preparing casualty notification paperwork, During the crisis meeting, Hazel approached flight operations requesting permission to perform routine maintenance inspection on UH-60 helicopter number 17. The duty officer, Lieutenant Morrison, dismissed her request without looking up from weather reports. Unnecessary right now, Quinn. Nobody's flying today anyway. Probably won't fly for another week if this storm continues. But Hazel knew something others didn't. She had personally serviced helicopter 17 just 6 days earlier, replacing worn rotor bearings and updating navigation software. That aircraft was in perfect mechanical condition, better than any other helicopter currently on base. More importantly, she had installed experimental storm tracking equipment during the maintenance cycle, equipment that might still be receiving signals other systems couldn't detect. Returning to her small workspace in the technical bay, Hazel quietly activated her personal emergency radio, scanning frequencies most people forgot existed. Static filled her headphones for 20 minutes. Then, barely audible through atmospheric interference, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A faint transmission. Morse code. Desperate. Repeating. SOS. 14 alive. Coordinates uncertain. Running out of time. Someone was still broadcasting. The missing team wasn't dead yet. Hazel burst into the command center, nearly knocking over a coffee pot in her urgency. Sir, they're not dead. I'm receiving emergency transmissions. Weak signal, but definitely human. We have to launch immediate rescue operations. Colonel Richards looked at the small woman in coveralls like she'd lost her mind. Quinn, our best equipment shows nothing. How could you possibly... I installed modified receivers during last week's maintenance cycle. Different frequency range. They're alive, sir, but not for long in these conditions. The colonel studied weather radar showing the storm intensifying. Even if that's true, no pilot would survive launching into this. I won't authorize suicide missions. Hazel straightened, removing her glasses to clean them with shaking hands. When she spoke again, her voice carried authority nobody had heard from her in 3 years. Sir, with all due respect, I'm the only person here who's successfully flown rescue missions in worse conditions. Before my transfer, I logged more severe weather hours than your entire current flight roster combined. I know Helicopter 17 better than anyone because I rebuilt half its systems myself. You haven't flown in 3 years, Quinn. Some things you never forget, sir, like how to save lives. The colonel looked at this quiet mechanic standing before him, suddenly seeing glimpses of the legendary pilot she used to be. But regulations were regulations. Insurance, liability, chain of command. I cannot and will not authorize this mission. Stand down, Lieutenant. Hazel nodded slowly, then walked back toward the hangar without another word. 20 minutes later, radar operator Sergeant Williams noticed something impossible on his screen. An unregistered aircraft signature moving directly into the storm center, completely bypassing all air traffic control protocols and official flight channels. Sir, we have an unauthorized aircraft airborne. No call sign, no flight plan, heading straight into the worst part of the blizzard. Colonel Richards rushed to the radar station, staring at the lone blip on screen. Who the hell is flying out there? All our pilots are accounted for and grounded. Senior Communications Officer Major Peterson suddenly recognized the radio frequency being used by the mystery aircraft. Sir, that's an old military navigation code. Haven't seen those numbers used since the 90s. Only veteran pilots even know those frequencies exist anymore. Then a familiar voice crackled through the radio static, calm and professional despite the circumstances. Ridgepoint Base, this is Quinn. I'm approximately 15 kilometers northeast of base coordinates. Visibility 0, flying instruments only. Cannot confirm exact position due to navigation interference, but I'm circling from the eastern approach to avoid the worst turbulence patterns. Every person in the command center froze. Quinn hadn't touched helicopter controls in 3 years. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Morrison. She actually did it. She stole helicopter 17. Inside the cockpit of UH-60 number 17, Hazel was fighting the storm of her life. The aircraft bucked and rolled like an angry horse, winds trying to flip her upside down every few seconds. Ice formed on the windscreen faster than heating elements could melt it. Navigation instruments flickered between readings as electromagnetic interference from the storm played havoc with electronics. but Hazel flew like she was born for this moment. She used techniques most modern pilots never learn: direct sensor flying, feeling wind direction through minute vibrations in the control stick, interpreting engine pitch changes to gauge airspeed when instruments failed, reading terrain through the way rotor wash echoed off invisible ground features below. Her eyes burned from staring through swirling snow, both hands cramped from gripping controls too tightly, but muscle memory took over. Every adjustment came from pure instinct developed through hundreds of dangerous flights over Alaska's unforgiving landscape. The storm was unlike anything she'd experienced before. Microbursts dropped the helicopter 300 feet in seconds. Crosswinds tried to slam her into mountain faces she couldn't see. But Hazel adapted, reading the storm's personality, finding pockets of calmer air, using the blizzard's own patterns against itself. She navigated by sound when vision failed completely. The way wind hit the fuselage told her altitude above terrain. Engine harmonics revealed true airspeed, regardless of instrument readings. Rotor blade vibrations indicated wind direction and intensity. She became part of the machine, thinking like the helicopter itself. After 45 minutes of searching through white hell, she spotted them. 14 figures huddled around the wreckage of their transport vehicle, nearly buried by snowdrifts, completely exposed to killing wind and cold. Their emergency flares were almost exhausted. They had maybe 1 hour left before hypothermia claimed them all. Landing was nearly impossible. The helicopter touched down at a dangerous angle as gusts tried to flip it sideways. But Hazel compensated with perfect control inputs, keeping the aircraft stable through sheer skill and determination. Loading 14 people into space designed for 8 required creative logistics. Hazel had anticipated this problem, bringing extra safety harnesses and survival equipment from base inventory. She personally secured each survivor with mountaineering rope and emergency blankets, checking everyone twice before departure. The return flight was even more treacherous. Overloaded aircraft, reduced maneuverability, failing instruments. When the radar system completely malfunctioned and navigation lights died, Hazel switched to pure dead reckoning, flying close to the ground to avoid getting lost in the storm, dodging cliff faces and radio towers through terrain memorized from years of flying these mountains. One survivor, barely conscious from hypothermia, later said, "I thought we were dead when I saw that helicopter trying to land. Looked impossible. But she made it look easy, like dancing with the storm instead of fighting it." Another added, "When our instruments went dark, she didn't even hesitate, just smiled and said, 'Now we fly the old way.'" I've never felt safer in my entire life. When Helicopter 17 finally appeared on Ridgepoint's radar, limping home through the blizzard with 14 souls aboard, the entire base operations center erupted in cheers and disbelief. Hazel Quinn refused every interview request. Local news wanted her story. Military investigators needed statements. Aviation magazines offered substantial money for exclusive access to Alaska's most dramatic rescue in decades. She declined everything. The morning after the rescue, she returned to the technical bay at exactly 0600 hours, wearing the same faded blue coveralls, same wire-rimmed glasses, carrying the same dented toolbox she'd used for 3 years. She swept floors, organized parts inventory, calibrated hydraulic systems like nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. When Hazel walked through the base now, conversations stopped. People stepped aside respectfully. Veterans who'd ignored her for years suddenly found reasons to visit the maintenance bay, hoping to hear details about flying through impossible conditions. She answered technical questions about helicopter performance, but never discussed the emotional aspects of the rescue. A photograph appeared on the break room bulletin board. Hazel sitting in Helicopter 17's cockpit immediately after landing, hair loose from its usual braids, snow melting on her glasses, exhaustion written across her face, but hands still gripping the controls with steady confidence. Someone had written beneath it, "She didn't ask permission to save lives." The base commander quietly updated her personnel file, reinstating full flight status and adding commendations for exceptional heroism under extreme conditions. But he never formally announced the changes or pressured her to resume active pilot duties. Aircraft Maintenance Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who'd supervised Hazel for 3 years, finally understood what he'd been witnessing. I thought she was just another grounded pilot who'd lost confidence. Turns out she was the most experienced storm pilot we had, staying sharp by maintaining every aircraft better than factory specifications. She knew exactly what each helicopter could handle because she'd personally inspected every component. One of the rescued technicians visited her workspace the following week, still recovering from frostbite. "Ma'am, I need to ask, why didn't you go back to full-time flying after proving you're still the best pilot on base?" Hazel looked up from the engine she was rebuilding, considering her words carefully. Being the best isn't about proving it every day. It's about being ready when people need you most. I can save more lives by keeping these aircraft perfect than by flying regular missions. She called her mother that evening. "Did you risk everything again, sweetheart?" "No, Mom. I just remembered what Dad always said. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is be exactly where you're supposed to be when someone needs help." Her mother's voice softened with understanding. "He would be proud, not because you flew into danger, but because you brought everyone home safely." Hazel Quinn was once Alaska's most skilled rescue pilot. She didn't quit flying because of failure or fear. She stepped back because of love, choosing to be present for her family during their most difficult moments. But when 14 lives hung in the balance, she proved that true expertise never disappears. It just waits quietly for the right moment. Some people choose to step away from careers or recognition to prioritize what matters most: family, personal values, mental health, or simply finding peace. Don't mistake that choice for weakness or giving up. They're often the people who possess the deepest knowledge and strongest character, precisely because they understand what's truly important in life. If you ever encounter someone working quietly in the background, doing essential work that others don't notice or appreciate, remember Hazel's story. They might be former experts who chose different priorities, but they're still capable of extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. Real strength isn't about never stepping back from the spotlight. It's about knowing when to step forward, regardless of what others think, when people need you most. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be ready.